Welcome to our discussion on producer surplus, where we'll unpack how market dynamics unlock value for sellers. In this overview slide, we introduce the idea that producer surplus sits at the intersection of economic analysis, strategic positioning, and financial impact, and we'll trace how price, cost, and market power translate into measurable gains for producers across industries. This slide defines producer surplus in both mathematical and graphical terms, explaining it as the collective gain from transactions equal to the difference between market price and marginal cost across units sold. The chart highlights that the shaded area above marginal cost and below price captures total producer benefit, while the notes remind us that price basis and lower marginal costs expand that aggregate value. When demand shifts outward, the market price and quantity change in ways that expand producer surplus, and the diagram here shows that incumbents often capture higher revenue on existing output, while new entrants can become profitable on expanded quantities. The panel also points out that the magnitude of gains depends on supply elasticity, so steeper supply curves give incumbents larger surplus increases. This page shows how cost-reducing technology shifts supply outward and boosts producer surplus, with the supply curve moving right as marginal costs fall. The visual compares original and new surplus, illustrating expanded surplus per unit and extra capacity for reinvestment, innovation, and competitive positioning when producers lower costs without proportionally reducing price. Here we explore pricing strategies that extract more surplus by aligning price with customer willingness to pay, from a single uniform price to segmented third-degree discrimination and the ideal of first-degree perfect pricing. The three-panel graphic shows how segmentation creates multiple surplus pockets and why dynamic pricing tools and analytics are required to realize that value in practice. This slide examines monopoly power and the consequences of restricting output, showing how limiting quantity elevates price and concentrates surplus with producers while shrinking consumer welfare. The diagrams illustrate surplus transfer and deadweight loss, emphasizing that output control can boost short-term profits but generates societal inefficiency and signals misallocated resources in the market. The policy comparison highlights how per-unit taxes and subsidies affect producer surplus differently. Taxes create a wedge between consumer and producer prices, eroding surplus and often hitting elastic suppliers hardest, while subsidies lower effective marginal cost, shift supply outward, expand markets, and raise surplus for remaining and new producers, suggesting clear strategic implications for firms and policymakers. This pair of trade diagrams shows that opening export opportunities can raise domestic prices toward world levels and expand surplus for low-cost producers, increasing value capture, while import competition tends to lower domestic prices to world levels and shrink surplus for higher-cost suppliers, with consumers generally benefiting from lower prices and increased selection. For software platforms, the combination of near-zero marginal costs and network effects creates an outsized producer surplus opportunity. Modest prices over negligible per-unit costs generate large surplus, growing user bases shift, demand outward, and sustained scalability prevents cost erosion as output expands, protecting long-term value and competitive advantage in digital markets. The price floor graphic explains how government mandates above equilibrium directly enlarge producer surplus, but also create excess supply and fiscal costs when purchases are taxpayer-funded. The slide walks through the mechanics of surplus transfer from consumers to producers, the resulting deadweight loss, and the broader redistribution and budgetary implications decision-makers should weigh. This slide focuses on dynamic pricing powered by real-time analytics, showing how consumer data, market signals, and instantaneous demand feed algorithms that optimize price to capture surplus. The market dynamics chart illustrates how these tools intensify surplus capture, reduce informational rent for buyers, and enable firms to translate data-driven insights into strategic pricing and higher realized value. The final slide contrasts how environmental costs compress traditional surplus with the opportunity to generate new green surplus through innovation and compliance, showing shifted supply and higher costs on one side and premium eco products and converted compliance streams on the other. The message is that forward-looking green investment can turn regulatory pressure into fresh revenue and differentiated value.